Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Huck. Today I am doing my fall DNFs, so these are going to be all of the books that I decided that I was not going to finish during the fall months, and so for me that means September, October, and November. So I have 5 books to talk about. Let's get started. The first book that I have is A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martine. This is a recent release. Maybe it came out, I don't know if it came out this year or last year, but it is a sci-fi, and in it our main character is sent as an ambassador to this other empire, which this empire is kind of like taking over the universe. And so she is an ambassador going there, and when she gets there she finds out that her predecessor has died and she suspects that someone has killed him. So she's trying to figure out what happened to him, but also acclimate to this new place and culture that she's in. And they also have this kind of technology that has to do with memories, where they're able to take memories from somebody and put them into this like piece of technology that's then implanted into someone else's brain so they can have both people's memories. So I've been wanting to read this one for a while because I've heard really great things about it, and also because it has memory as a theme, which is a thing that I enjoy. But then I ended up reading it in September specifically because as part of the Genre Readers Book Club, which is a book club run by Chris from Chris Bookish Cauldron and Jessica from Jessica Reads Things, and it's a book club where they read a book from a different genre every month, and so September was sci-fi, and so I decided to read it in September to join them because I'd been excited about reading this one for a while. But I ended up DNFing it for a few reasons. Part of it is because there were some things about the premise and the context in which things were happening that bothered me, that like just didn't quite line up or make sense to me. One of the things that bothered me was that she's an ambassador to this place that is like politically hostile, and yet she's sent there completely alone, and that doesn't make sense to me. Like, ambassadors travel with at least like a secretary or something, if not a retinue of some sort. And this was a thing that seemed to bother some people and not bother others. It was something for me though that just right off the bat was a detail that seemed very unrealistic and was irking me, and then kind of later down the line led to other things that were bothering me about this book. If she had traveled with other people, then those problems wouldn't have arisen. And of course there would have been less drama in the story because she wouldn't have been like forced into these situations and forced to trust people when maybe she shouldn't. But I would have preferred less drama and more of that element of realism that I think would have been more realistic. Not everyone agreed with me, but I think it would have been more realistic if she had traveled with other people. And then the other thing that really ended up making me DNF it was that there was really a lack of character work or character development. I never felt like I really knew the characters or understood them, and then they would do things that were really frustrating and I didn't understand why they were doing them because I didn't know them. I felt like this book was definitely trying to focus on like larger themes and concepts, which were kind of interesting, but I just like wasn't really connecting with the execution of them. And even with books that are focusing on larger themes and concepts, I think that they still really benefit from having strong character work, because most of the time those concepts will hit harder if there is a character that you can be really connected with, and then you can see and feel the impact of these larger themes on a character. And I felt like this book didn't really do the character work in order to have those larger themes really hit home. So I just ended up being really disconnected from this, and I decided to DNF. Next, in October, I DNF'd And the Trees Crept In by Dawn Kurtagich. This is a YA horror where we're following 2 girls who are running away from an abusive household, and they're going to their aunt's house. They've never met this aunt before, but they show up at her door. She lives in this like old family mansion that is right next to the forest, and then she takes them in and they find out that there's something creepy in the woods. So I wanted to give this one a try because it was October, so I thought, why not try reading a horror book? And I thought this one might be a good place to start because it's YA horror, so it may not be like as intense as adult horror. It involves a creepy forest, which is the thing that I like. And I've heard it is very atmospheric, and that the audiobook was really great because I was listening to it as an audiobook. And I do think that the audiobook is really well produced. And I think the book is probably good. I don't really know. I think what I have learned is that horror is not really my genre, because every time I try to read a book that is like genre horror, not just like some other genre with a little bit of horror elements, but something that is like primarily a horror book, I end up not liking it. Usually I end up DNFing it, and most often it's because I get bored, because I think it just doesn't tend to focus on the things that I care about. Because in this one, there was a brief period at the beginning of the book where it's just about like the two sisters settling in with the aunt and like settling into living there, and they're just like gardening and cooking, and it's very nice. And if that had been the entire book, I probably would have loved it, but obviously that wasn't going to be the whole book because it's a horror book. And so I was enjoying it, but then once it got to the point in the story where it actually like got into the horror elements of it, I got really bored and I just didn't care anymore. So I think that what I have learned is that horror is not my genre. Then in November, I had 3 DNFs. The first one is A Conspiracy of Truths by Alexandra Rowland, which I was very disappointed that I ended up DNFing this because I had been very excited about it. So this is an adult high fantasy that follows a man who is a chant, which is a kind of person who travels around the world and collects stories and then also tells stories. So they're a traveling storyteller, but they kind of are meant to hold this like knowledge of humanity. And at the beginning of this, he has just traveled to a new country that he's never been to before. For some reason, they accuse him of witchcraft and he is arrested, and now he's going to be standing trial for witchcraft. And then they also, for some reason, think that he might be a spy. And then he kind of like gets involved in all of the politics because he's trying to like manipulate different people against each other to help get him out of this. And this one, I like the larger concepts of this book because it is a book about storytelling, which is originally what drew me to this. But the actual plot of the book is really about this character dealing with this ridiculous legal system. And it's like, I think it's meant to be kind of humorous, but it's not a kind of humor that really works for me because it's like the humor of like the follies of bureaucracy, which I know is a thing that some people enjoy, but that is not a kind of humor that I find very entertaining. I was about 150 pages into this. I ended up actually listening to it as an audiobook because also I didn't like the writing style of it, or the tone. I don't know, because in this, it has a very conversational tone because the main character is talking to you. It very much is like he is talking to the reader. And that is not a storytelling tactic that I really like. I don't like my books to talk to me. So I just didn't appreciate that. I read like the first page and I was like, oh no, we're switching to audiobook. Like I would not have made it past the first page if I had tried to read it physically. I did like it more as an audiobook, but it definitely was like not a writing style or tone that worked for me. Another thing that was just kind of weird about this that did not really hinder my enjoyment, but there are no chapters in this. It's all just like one thing broken up by like stories that he tells. So that didn't like change my opinion about it, but it was weird and it surprised me. The one thing that I did like about this though was his apprentice, because his apprentice is very cute and I enjoyed his character. Next, I DNF'd Silent Hall by N.S. Dolkart, which is another one that I was very disappointed about. So this is an adult high fantasy that in this we're following like 5 or 6 main characters who are all from one island but from very different like backgrounds. And at the beginning of the book, they all leave this island for various reasons, and right after they leave, the island is struck by a magical plague, so they can't go back to the island. They decide to all kind of team up and travel together, and then they end up going on a quest together. So from what I had read from this, what I didn't like about it was really the way the story was crafted. The writing itself was fine. It was pretty easy to read, and that was all right, but the introduction of characters, of plot lines, the pacing, the reveal or withholding of information, like those kind of things, I didn't really like how they were handled. At the beginning of the book, he just kind of introduces each of the characters very quickly in like very short chapters, so we don't really get to know much about them, and then that kind of method sort of continues throughout the book, at least throughout the part that I read. I got about 100 pages into this, but essentially the author just kind of goes around and tells like a little snippet from each character's perspective very briefly, and so I felt like it would have worked better if the introduction of the characters had been staggered a little bit, so that it didn't feel like we were just kind of flitting from one character to the next. This book also had a weirdly little amount of dialogue in it. Like, there wasn't really internal dialogue, there wasn't really external dialogue. It was just kind of information that I guess was the character's thoughts, but it wasn't really in a dialogue format. It was just sort of info dumping information as the characters were like observing the world, and it was very strange to read. And I think it really would have benefited from more dialogue, more interaction. The characters didn't interact with each other that much, and then when they did, a lot of times what he would do is kind of give us a summary of what had happened in the interaction instead of showing us the interaction, which was also a very strange choice, which I did not like. Also, he really didn't convey any like emotion through the writing, through the characters, through like any part of this, even though like right off the bat there are people dying. Like, one of the characters loses a friend almost immediately. Their entire island dies, so like all of their friends and family and like the home that they have known, everything's dead now. And like it just felt like the characters went, I am sad, and then that was it. And it just like, it was like weirdly lacking in emotion. I don't know. It was just, I don't know. I just like couldn't keep going with it. And then the last book that I DNF'd is Daughter of Ireland by Julian Osborne McKnight. This is a historical fiction, historical fantasy maybe, about this woman who is a druid priestess in ancient Ireland. And this one, from the beginning, I just couldn't get into it. I don't really know why. I just like it just wasn't working for me. And then I went and read some reviews of it, and just some of the things that people were saying in the reviews made me think like, oh yeah, I don't think that this is going to work for me. So those are all the books that I DNF'd this fall. If you have read any of these, let me know what you thought of them. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, bye!